And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on Thursday, February 20th, 2025. And this outlook is for the early weekend, Friday into Saturday. So what we have coming up here, the most active weather is going to be along the Gulf and up into the Panhandle, as we have by Friday morning. There is one weak area of low pressure just south of Kodiak Island that's going to pull back across the Alaska Peninsula as we go through the day. And then over the course of the weekend, there's going to be 2 or 3 smaller lows just kind of rotate up out of the North Pacific into the Gulf and provide moisture feeds into the Panhandle that will eventually spread along the Gulf Coast, but the bulk of it taking aim into the Panhandle. Temperatures should be warm enough to have mainly rain at sea level and the lower elevations, but the coastal mountains, as you get further up in elevation, will likely see some snow. And as we expect on Friday morning, IFR conditions out over the central Bering, St. Matthew, down through the Alaska Peninsula, east side of Kodiak Island, along the Gulf Coast, eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound, all through the Panhandle, expect IFR conditions. Also some IFR conditions along the Alcan border, up there toward Eagle, Northway areas, and then also a pocket in the central Brooks North Slope area for Friday morning. As we go into Friday afternoon, we find some improvement to MVFR over the Panhandle, but already the next system coming northward with more moisture, lower ceilings, and precipitation, along with some breezy conditions. We have IFR conditions that'll be overspreading further north. Still lingering IFR conditions, Prince William Sound, and then we find IFR conditions along the Chukchi Sea coast east of Utqiagvik, so from Point Hope to east of Utqiagvik. Part of this is because of stronger winds blowing. Snow could reduce visibility up that way, and that'll be the trend over the weekend. Generally, some gusty winds here along the Arctic coast will create lower visibilities and some blowing snow. And then down here, across the Alaska Peninsula up to St. Matthew and just east of the Pribilovs, and then back way out toward the western Aleutians. Saturday morning, pockets of IFR. Hyder inner coastal mountains there of the southern Panhandle, the northern Panhandle, including Haines, Skagway, Chilkoot, White. We find pockets of IFR along the Alcan border, again, toward Northway and 40-mile Gold Country, and then along and south of the Alaska Range. Still IFR conditions along parts of the Beaufort Sea coast, Point Lay to Utqiagvik, and then we also have some IFR conditions perhaps in the southwest around Wood Tikchik State Park, out into Bristol Bay, and then back out into the central Bering. And Saturday afternoon, we find at least improving conditions over areas of the mainland and the Panhandle. The outlook then for Friday, Anaktuvik Pass, IFR conditions becoming MVFR. Adigan Pass should generally see MVFR conditions up there through the east central Brooks Range. Lake Clark and Merrill, MVFR conditions becoming IFR. Same thing, Rainy Pass, MVFR becoming IFR on Friday. And generally on Friday, Windy Pass should see MVFR conditions, as will Isabel Pass. Further east, Mentasta Pass may actually become VFR midday into the afternoon. And then dropping down across the Copper River Basin to start early on, Tanita Pass, IFR becoming MVFR. And then Portage Pass should generally see IFR conditions on Friday, mid-pass out into Prince William Sound, west entrance MVFR. And in the northern parts of the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White starting off early Friday with IFR conditions becoming MVFR. So the freezing levels, the surface freezing line in the morning will extend out over the central Bering, dipping down into the northern Panhandle, along the Kenai coast and areas of the northeastern Gulf Coast into the inner channels of the Panhandle, especially there, generally north of Wrangell and Petersburg. But with the weather system, the low that's out in this region Friday morning, we've had a flow of milder air northward, so the freezing levels aloft are higher, 2,000 feet over the central Panhandle, 4,000 feet there, Dixon Entrance, 6,000 feet, Haida Gwaii southward. And with the moisture that's around, you either have clouds that are producing precipitation or just clouds that are composed of that ice crystals, water vapor, and that. We will find the potential for some isolated moderate icing above 6,000 feet, southern Panhandle, areas of the northern and western Gulf, back across Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, and into Bristol Bay above 4,000 feet, and then further west with another low that's way out here, out toward the western portion of the Bering Sea above 4,000 feet. Upper level jet stream winds not impressive over the state. We have a jet core coming in to Vancouver Island into Washington state coastline upwards around 105 to 115 knots. At 9,000 feet, we find a mid-level core of winds of 50 to 65 knots again off of Vancouver Island in the North Pacific. And back here across areas of the Western Gulf, a southerly flow at 9,000 feet on the order of 30 to 40 knots up into the Kenai Peninsula, south side of the Alaska Range. Up here in the far north, though, in the Chukchi Sea, there's easterly flow 35 to near 40 knots into eastern Russia, and then bringing it down to 3,000 feet. We find there are some winds in the southern panhandle, Dixon Entrance there between Haida Gwaii and Prince of Wales Island. Locally, some winds out of the southeast upwards of 50 knots. And then western Gulf into the entrance of Cook Inlet, 35 to 40 knot winds. But more importantly, we have some rather stronger winds along the Arctic coast from Kaktovik all the way across, especially coming here off the western Brooks Range, North Slope, Cape Lisburne, Point Hope area. We could see winds 50 to 60 knots out of the east in that location. So the greatest threat for some moderate to isolated severe turbulence will be along that Lisburne Peninsula around Cape Lisburne there in the tip of the western portion of the Brooks Range and North Slope. Surface to 3,000 feet. Along and south of the Brooks Range, a broad area, moderate turbulence possible. Surface to 4,000 feet. And that'll also extend out toward St. Lawrence Island. And then in the southern parts of the state, we have Iliamna, the northern Alaska Peninsula, northern parts of Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound. Outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, there could be some moderate turbulence. Surface to 6,000 feet there, and then also along areas of the western and southern portion of the Panhandle, Sitka down toward Prince of Wales Island to Metlakatla and Dixon Entrance. There could be some moderate turbulence on Friday. Surface to 6,000 feet.